Do you find yourself up at night worried? You know, that 3 a.m. problem that keeps you from sleeping? Or maybe you're the type of person that kind of beats yourself up when you make a mistake or when you have failed. Our topic tonight is 3 eye-opening reasons we struggle to give up shame, blame, worry, and guilt. Why we have challenges with uncertainty, why we have challenges with unpredictable situations, why we fight to maintain control. My name is Suzanne Hart, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Each week we bring you breakthrough strategies to help you reset your thinking so that you can feel empowered when life becomes unpredictable and uncertain. This conversation is for you. If you find yourself running into the future, worrying about things that might happen that are still beyond your control, this is for you. If you are the perfectionist, and when you fail or don't get something right, you spend time beating yourself up. Or you just struggle to get going because it must be perfect, it must be right before you go. So I am so excited about this conversation. I'm so excited to get us started. So as you jump on, please let us know who you are, where you are joining us from. Okay, what part of the world you're from. Let us know what you do while you're living and who you are called to serve, who your divine client is. If you have a question that came up as you were reading about the conversation that we're going to have tonight, definitely put it in the comment section. Next thing I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead, share, bless a life, share this to your personal page, share this with a friend who you think this conversation would definitely touch. Share it in a group that you're a part of and say, this is going to be a hot and interesting conversation. If you're joining us after the fact and you are listening to the replay, #replay, thank you for joining us. When you love what you hear, definitely go ahead and share to a group, a friend, someone you know this conversation will inspire. I'm also going to ask you to put your information in the comment section. What that is who you are, where you're joining us from, what part of the world, what you do while you're living, and who you're called to serve. And if there is a takeaway or a question that you have, definitely put it in the comment section, because we'll go back after the fact, go through all the comments, and we'll make sure and get that answered for you. You can also reach out to me directly and get your question answered. I'd be happy to do so. The reason we asked you guys to put your information in the comment section, because this is our virtual networking opportunity. This is your opportunity to connect, reach out to someone possibly across the globe, find out what they do. They may find out what you do. And we have had people connect, exchange information, and then actually begin to do business or collaborate. So you never know. So don't just join us. Let people know who you are, what you do, what has you excited, what are you passionate about. I see that we have Yetta Decker out joining us. Hello, Yetta. I got a little bit tongue-tied there. So welcome. All right, so let us get this topic going. As I said, my name is Suzanne Hart. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Our conversation that we will be having today is 3 eye-opening reasons why you and I, struggle to give up shame, blame, worry, and guilt. My guest tonight, you all know her, some people call her my partner in crime, and she kind of is. This is a woman who's committed to serve. She's come out from behind the camera to show up and shine. She wants to be unstoppable and also help you become unstoppable. Please welcome social media strategist Taria Hodge.
All right. Welcome. Thank you, Suzanne, for having me on for another exciting episode of Unstoppable Mindset. I can't wait to unpack this conversation tonight.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be an interesting conversation because, Shame, blame, guilt, worry, judgment, all those things are not actually conversations we sit down and have, right? They're conversations that we privately struggle with, and they are so very common. And as we're in the section of master your emotions, this is a key conversation. We've been having this conversation as part of my mastermind, and it has been rocking some people's worlds. People have been having some total ahas. So I wanted to just touch a little bit about what we've been talking about, and jump into this conversation. So I think where I want to start is when you hear the words shame, blame, worry, guilt, what comes up for you?
Oh, all of these heavy emotions, those are the things that, weigh us down, and they kind of tend to weigh us down in secret. Okay, so it's like we have sometimes these things that's running in the background. I like how you always put it, there's always a story that's running in the background, right? Always something running in
Mhm.
your head. So what's the story that's running in your head? What's the narrative? Okay, and like
Mhm.
you said, oftentimes there's this narrative that's running, but we don't walk around and forwardly tell the world that, hey, this is the narrative, or this is a talk, the negative self-talk that's going on inside of my head. But what happens, it's displayed, so people see it through our actions.
Yeah, it's so true. One of the questions I had, because as I train in the mastermind and as I train in the whole process of mindset mastery, we talked a little about last week that one of the steps in mindset mastery is acceptance.
Hmm.
And in order to sit in acceptance, in order to accept the situation, the byproduct of that is we are required to give up shame, blame, guilt,
Hmm.
judgment,
Hmm.
all those wonderful things, worry, all those things. It's kind of like we clear it out. When I say give it up, I mean that we're required to deal with it, accept it, and not allow it to be the place or the space we make our decision from. And but one of the things I'm realizing as I talk with people and as I'm doing this work in the mastermind and with different individuals that I mentor is that it's not easy to give it up.
Yeah, so that
I
was
mean,
going to be one of the questions, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the question, and I know you and I, we've talked about it, and I think that's the thing that people really want to know is like, okay, now that you have this emotion, first of all, to even come present to it. So the first word that you use is acceptance. So a lot of times, what I'm learning is that there's a whole bunch of emotions, right? And usually for me, I don't know about anybody else, all those emotions just get grouped into one emotion, which is, the angry emotions, right? And, this is so interesting that we're talking about this because, we hear things, all the time, like the angry black woman, right? Like, I've never considered myself being like an angry black woman. Like me, nah, I don't fit that, right? But this is the thing, all of those emotions are just grouped into one category, and it usually is displayed as anger, right? And we kind of tend to hold it and we walk around with it. And so I love that you're starting off the conversation with acceptance. Okay, so now that you are willing to accept that there's something there, then
mm.
what is it? And it's only when you start to really unpack it and give it attention, right? Then you could really start to, go a little bit deeper and say, well, exactly what is this?
And one of the things for me, it's one thing to say, what is it? Right. And but I think the bigger piece is, why is it so prevalent?
Hmm.
Right? Why is it so prevalent in society that we have high rates of suicide because people are ashamed of their situations? They feel out of control. We have high rates of, we've been reading about, agents being assaulted at high rates, and it's rising
Yeah.
and being blamed for COVID. You see, we see all these situations happening, and the bigger question is not only that shame, blame, guilt, worry, judgment that happens, but why is it happening? And one of the things I have been kind of really looking at is some things, right? I'm looking down because I have some questions here. So it's why control and perfection is one of those things that keep us stuck in this place. Our need to control our situation and our need to be perfect. And I think when I look at the moments where I have felt the most shame or the most blaming of someone or a group of people, it has been when the times when I have felt extremely out of control. In other words, things are happening in my life and I am feeling out of control. It has also been the times where shame has really run me in those moments, a recovering perfectionist,
Yeah.
when I have attempted to be perfect. And if you're a perfectionist, you soon realize that it's an impossible thing.
Yeah.
So when you try to be perfect and you fail, there's this whole conversation that runs us. And so one of the things I'm learning is when you and I have our self-worth tied to being in control and getting things right and looking good and perfect and productivity, that's really the word I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
When my self-worth, my belief in how good I am, the belief in how much the world loves me, how people will approve of me, is tied to what I produce in the world, it's a hard place to get away from shame, blame, guilt, and judgment.
Yeah, and I think so much of it, and I'm getting ready to go into the blame thing right now, right? But so much of it is like a setup because that's what we've been taught, right? So when I sit and I take a look at how I've been raised, it's almost like, yeah, perfect. You have to do this or you have to become this. And if you don't become this or do this by this age, then something is wrong with you. And the list of those things like are so long. And so you find yourself like, yeah, like living up to or trying to live up to the expectations, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. Like nobody ever talks about failure and like how you deal with the failure. Like I've waited all my life, right, to hear that, you know what, failure is a good thing, to get excited when you fail because it's
Mhm.
an opportunity to learn something, how you're going to move on. But as a kid growing up, oh my gosh, no, it's the worst thing, right?
Yeah.
And so even at a young age, we have those little seeds, of doubt, and doubt in our self-worth, like just planted and being watered, right? And like
Mhm.
nobody really sets you up for adulthood, right? And then you get into adulthood and then it's all of these things. So it's like, how do you deal with that? How do you, like, when you get to that place and you recognize all of these things, like I said, you're walking around with all of these emotions on the inside and you don't necessarily even know what the emotions are. So if you
Mhm.
don't even know what they are, like how can you address them?
So it's not it doesn't start at adulthood,
Mhm.
right? I remember, when I look back, I remember, feeling shame about being different, just being different, and not being able to fit in or belong,
Mhm.
right? And so that was my first, and not having control over the fact that my skin is black, my hair is kinky, I'm different, and I grew up in an all white community, and so not being able to change that and not knowing what to do with it, right? And just not belonging and being teased And not that I didn't like myself, it was that I couldn't fit in. And it was so painful at times when I was young not to be able to fit, not being able to do anything different, and feeling all these emotions. And then you get into, school, and there's all these things that you must do. Suzanne can't spell for the life of her, and to this day, not a good thing. And so I remember having all these feelings about my own intelligence and my own capacity because I couldn't spell. And and not being able, and where do you go with that? And no one, and unfortunately people don't talk to you about what happens when you can't spell. It's either you're good, you're bad, you're passing, you're failing. And failing is not like a place to grow with those days. It's like it's not good. And so I think one of the things that we are conditioned to is that if I produce A, I'm good and worthy. And if I don't produce A, I'm not good and I'm not worthy. And I think if we get into genders, we get into men, if you're strong, you're a great man. If you're tough, you're a great man. If you show emotions, you're not so great. There's all these things that determine what we should feel good about and what we shouldn't. And they feel so set that until you start doing the work that we aren't really conditioned to do either, walk around with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, when we get into our next question, but we walk around with all these emotions because in many ways we're taught our self-worth is tied to productivity.
Yeah.
They're tied to great scores. They're tied to how we look, right? Are you wearing the newest trending stuff? Do you got the coolest shoes? Is your economics in the right place? Are you slim? It's the whole thing. What car you
It's a
drive,
whole laundry list of stuff.
right? And so we're striving for all these things that society puts up as this is when you are worthy.
Yeah.
And this, if you don't achieve it, sorry for you. And so no one talks about it, but we walk around with all the emotions of it: shaming, embarrassment, guilt, worried about people will find. Like, we walk around with all of that.
As you're speaking, it reminded me of a post that I saw today. I can't remember who posted it, but what we're talking about is such a great example, right? So scrolling through my Facebook timeline, someone took a picture of a young lady. Now she is in a department store and she's wearing pajamas and a bonnet, right? So I don't know if there's a whole big discussion going on about the bonnet, right? Should you or should you not wear bonnets outside of the house, right? Like, who knows, it's a thing. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I was surprised to see how many people engaged, under the post. When I tell you, I promise you 1,000 shares, like viral, over a young lady in a department store in her PJs. And, when I see stuff like that, for research purposes, I have to go read the comments because I like to find out, like, what are the conversations that really try to go viral. So pure research, right?
Gotcha.
But it was really interesting to see people's views. And it's the same thing that we're talking about, right? And so some people, the majority of people, are judging her like on this standard. So just on the face value of a picture, right? They've created a whole narrative of who she is, where she lives, how she thinks, how her mama raised her, you know, what her relationship probably looks like. No picture, no pictures of kids in the thing, but how she's raising her kids is crazy, right? And then, you know, very few you'll see comments like, "Hey, like, when did we get to this place where we sit as judge and jury over someone? Like, you don't
Mhm.
know like what her situation is. You don't know,
Yeah.
okay?" And then I thought about it and I was just like, you know what? Kudos to you, young lady, you know, for deciding to just be comfortable in your skin.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's what you felt called or led to do, right, then go for it, you know, and be happy. But that's you know, it's the same thing like we're talking about, right? Like all of these expectations, you know, that
Mhm.
society has placed on us on, you know, what the standard of beauty should be like, you know, the standard of dress. And when people see you have certain material things, what does it mean versus when you don't have it, what does it mean? And
Mhm.
if you fall into it, like seriously, it is the makings, you know, for crazy, like my mom would say.
It is, it is. And it's a lot of pressure, and it's a
Yeah.
lot and it's a lot of, and it's a lot of masking and facades and all those things. And it brings us right into our next question, because the next question is how to embrace uncertainty and change. And I think one of the reasons that you see all those comments
Hmm.
is because, you know, they say that if I am, and I'm just going to put it out there, but if I am comfortable in my own skin, I rarely have anything to say about someone
Hmm.
else who's comfortable in their skin.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
am walking in the world to my own beat, I rarely have anything to say. And so I think that oftentimes when you see all those judgments of people, the judgments are a reflection of us holding up the
Hmm.
facade that we think is
Yeah.
needed. It's like, it's almost like you say, well, I'm not like that, so I'm not in this camp, I'm in this camp over here. Meanwhile, you're struggling to be in the camp.
I was just about to say, I'm going right back to that post, right? Because I'm looking at some of the comments, and even to me, like when I, you know, read it and I saw it, I was like, my mama would kill me, right? But that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about, you know, that pressure, you know, to be a certain way and to look a certain way, because it's not just you, you know, they put the whole weight of it on you. It's a reflection of your family, and they took it all the way there. It's a reflection of the whole race, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
it at like 1700 comments, right? They took it all the way, like she is now the representation of the entire race. But
And I get it. I get it. Because I know for myself, before I started doing this work, and this was kind of the motivator for doing this work, and I'm going to say hello to LaDawn, welcome.
you're done.
I see Stacy, girl, nice to see you. The Facebook user who's saying hello, beautiful queens, hello to you. Please put your name in the comment section so we know exactly who's hanging out with us. I remember before I started doing this work, I would say that, you know, keeping up with the Joneses was serious pressure. You
Yeah.
know, the two cars, the home, in the, you know, where we lived on the bluffs in Toronto, um, all those different things. It was serious pressure,
Yeah.
and I remember the pain of being judged, right?
Mhm.
And the pain of being judged because I was fronting. That, let's just be real. I was fronting, and I knew I was fronting. But this was the thing: when you judge me, I am quick. I would come back with some backlash. It would be like right? And so I know that a lot of times when we see all that, it is our own protective mechanism. But this is why this stuff makes uncertainty and change so difficult. I want
Mm-hmm.
you to think about it. So we're all fronting, okay? We're all
Mm-hmm.
got to keep up with the facade and the this and the that, and I can barely afford my shoes, my car, my Rolex, my this, my that. I got all this going on. This is the crazy thing about uncertainty and change. When uncertainty and change happens, it makes us feel out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And when you and I are out of control, we worry about maintaining the status quo. We worry about what will happen if something falls and the Joneses see it fall. What's going to happen if I can't afford my car? We worry about those things. And we put all this undue
Yeah.
pressure on ourselves because we're worried, because there's so much energy
Yeah.
about keeping up the front that society says is necessary, that when change happens, change makes us feel so vulnerable because we're having a hard enough time controlling the facade
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
without having to deal with change, because now it's unpredictable. And what happens if something moves and I can't control it, and someone sees a peek behind the curtain?
Yeah, and I think the whole thing is the control part, right? So like it's, I never really looked at myself in this aspect like control, but really and truly that's what it is. Like whenever I feel like I don't have that control, it's just like I think that's when I, you know,
We lose it.
yeah, I go crazy. Like, oh wait, I can't control the situation. I can't figure, and I try to pretty it up. Oh, I can't figure it out. I literally just said that on another call today. Like in my mind, I'm trying to figure it out, and that's control. That's me trying to control the situation. I'm saying, hey, I'm in this place. Something happened, right? And I can't figure it out. And so from there, it's just like, oh, like, what do you do? And is the craziest thing, because we're going back to the narrative. And this is one of the things that, you and I unpacked this week. Like we tend to run like the worst case scenario. Like if you leave it up to our minds will take you like
Mhm.
whoosh,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And it's nowhere near like the reality of the situation. Okay, and you brought up something earlier, and we took a look at all of the events, of 2020. We had a lot going on in 2020, and so when we actually take a look at it, what's behind all of the emotions is a whole range of
Mhm.
emotions that people are feeling
Yeah,
because things just seem like they abruptly changed.
yeah,
Okay, and it's how we now start to project those feelings on others. And that's the thing that we have to watch too. It's like we do it to ourselves, that's one thing. But when it also comes to other people, like you said, the blaming, right? And the shaming of other people and the pointing of fingers and making stuff, everybody else's fault. I think 2020 was just like the perfect example of that.
it was a height
Yeah.
of those things. And I think, one of the reasons I was inspired to do part of this live was to really have us look at what happens when we feel out of control,
Yeah.
and particularly when we've internalized stuff. And what
Mhm.
I mean by internalized is, when society has placed beliefs on us, whether that be the belief of the status of your race, whether that be the belief of your status economics, and if you're not set at a higher standard, then you're less than, or all those things, whether it be your language, whether it be your culture, your religion, all these things. When society puts these labels and judgments on us, and we begin to internalize it, right? Part of it is there is a shame and a powerlessness that you end up walking with. And when we internalize those things, the defense mechanism is often to make someone else less than.
Yeah.
Because so there's two things that often happen. If someone tells me I'm less than, and I don't do my work, I'm going to look to see where I can find power and how can I feel good about myself. And oftentimes we see people who are feeling uncertain, who are feeling powerless. They're attacking someone else so they can feel a little better about who they are and their situation. That's one. I think the other thing that we see happen is that people will also, it's like we need an answer. Our mind, my mind, I know, because when I have those 3 a.m. problems, my mind is up and it's in this search for something.
Yeah.
And when I can't find something, I catch myself. It goes to, well, who we gonna blame? Whose fault is it? And it's funny because I'll sit there and I'll go, Suzanne, look at you. You just making up stories and casting blame.
But that's such a good catch.
Because my mind needs an answer. It needs a responsible party. It needs someone to point the finger at. And I catch myself. So I'm just being candid. I catch myself, and it's funny because I'll laugh and I'll be like, look at you, creating stories and casting shade. Nobody in the house but me. But and what it is that we need, when I can give the blame to someone, I feel a little bit more in control. But this is the other part. When I can point the finger at someone, I'm not responsible for me creating control in my world. Right? So that is the crazy of it. So when you see, and you know, when I see it and I see people attacking Asians at this stage in time, and when I see my brothers and sisters, Black people attacking Asians, I'm like, okay, that's a whole other level. But that's a level of internalized stuff where you feel so out of control and you feel so much internalized shame and anger and lack of respect that you're looking for someone who you feel has less power than you to abuse, to shame, to blame, so that you can feel a little better about your situation. And so the work is so key that we kind of start to go, what is really going on here?
And that's what I mean, right? So it's really good that, you know, when you go into those moments, you're able to catch yourself, right? And just imagine, like you said, the work, you know, for those who, you know, haven't done the work, don't know that there's work to do. So that's the whole thing, right? Just not even being aware, you know, of what's happening or what's really going on. Then we see all of these things. And I like how you, in our talk in a week, how you put it, hurt people, right? And it's like when you said it, you know, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to like, oh, you know, that's one to meditate on, like hurt people. Now, I've heard that saying before, but have always only applied it like in a relationship sense. But it's like when you think about it, it goes all the way across the board, right? And so if there are areas in your life that you are hurting or you're just hurting in general, then that's what it is you do. You look for that person or those group of people, just so you could just exalt just a little bit more, a little bit above, just to say, I am not that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I
And
am not there.
and this stuff runs so deep because when we're looking at it, and there's so many situations, when we look at guilt, right? When
Mhm.
people feel guilt and they're burdened with guilt, if they're not willing to own it, it's a weight, and they will lash out at people, right? Because they have a disruption within them that they're not ready to deal with. When people feel intense shame and or internalized shame that comes from oppression,
Mhm.
marginalization, all those things, they reach out and they lash out at people in order to deflect the amount of shame, because shame is not, we don't want it, no one wants it to be exposed publicly,
Yeah.
particularly with people you don't know you can trust. So there's this lashing out that happens when we have, all those deep emotions, because we haven't been taught to deal with them. They're happening. And so what we're seeing in society today is this playing out publicly
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
all these emotions that people don't understand,
Yeah.
right? It's just, there's so much that they don't understand. And you will always see when when the economy becomes unstable and unpredictable, people start pointing the finger at the next group they think that are less than them.
Yeah.
Well, if this group leaves the country, if they would just go, there'd be more jobs. Not really. That's not how it works, right? You see an increase in abuse in terms of families, and when men feel out of control, some men they oppress and abuse their wives because
Hmm.
I have power over that
Yeah.
person. You'll see the rise in abuse of children because I have power over it. And so part of what we're charged with in the times that we're in is to do the work. So, last week we were talking about emotional literacy. In the mastermind, we've been talking about emotional literacy, and is being able to see the clues and the cues that identify the different emotions. When am I in shame? When am I in guilt? When am I in frustration? When am I feeling like all those different things, so that you can actually begin to talk through it, right? But we're not, this is not something that the society does or talks about. So
Right.
it's a festering pool.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think I love what you share, being able to name it. Okay, because once again, there's a lot of emotions. We walk around with a lot of stuff, right? But can you, address it? Can you name it? And I love it. Like, I've never heard the term emotional literacy until you said it. And it's like, oh, that really makes sense, right? Like, to really stop, take a pause, take a beat. Like, what am I feeling right now? Okay. And
Mhm.
and process. And I have to say, like, yeah, like me, I'm a stuffer. Right? Like, I'm a stuffer. I'm like, oh my gosh, like emotions? No. Can we deal with something else? Isn't there a tool, technology that we could go play with,
Mhm.
right? And push it down, right? So it's now learning, when these things come up, not putting them on the back burner, but saying, hey, okay, as scary as it may feel, this is what I'm feeling, but why? Okay,
Mhm.
let's unpack this a little bit, right?
Mhm.
And then being able to go through that dialogue with myself, and then eventually go through the dialogue with someone else. To
Absolutely,
unpack
absolutely.
it.
And the last question that I had, that I asked, as we're preparing for this, is vulnerability a strength or a weakness? And I remember when I was young, I was the family crier, right? Anything happens, Suzanne got some boo-hoos. like actually, my mother be like, this child cry for everything. Like, what are we gonna do with her? Uh, and everyone else in my family, they tough. They don't cry for nothing. They stuff, right? Me, the whole world know Suzanne upset. She cries, she loud, all this sort of stuff. But what I learned over time was that I was willing, because nobody told me I wasn't supposed to be vulnerable to a certain extent. So I was very self-expressed with my emotions,
Mm.
not knowing what to do with it, but I knew how to get it out. And I think part of what it is we see vulnerability as a weakness. But the vulnerability that comes with expression of emotions
Yeah.
is actually one of our biggest strengths.
Yeah.
Because when I and you are able to name an emotion and name what's going on for us, it creates the space for the conversation. It creates the space for the reflection of what am I making this mean? What is this about? It creates but in order to do that, you and I have to take on being
Yeah.
vulnerable, being seen, being felt in terms of this is what I'm feeling. We have to take on all this stuff. The society says when you do this, you are weak. When
Yeah.
you do this, you are not man enough. When you do this, you're not woman enough. When you do this, you are not all these things. And so we are going to be required to venture into that. And we're going to, as individuals, we're going to be required to do it. As communities, we're going to be required to do it. I mean, within communities and community to community, right? Because one of the reasons no one's doing the real racism work, it's because it's a very vulnerable
Oh, yeah.
question or conversation. And we are busy, it's the blame game,
Yep.
right? Who is more responsible for the bad situation? Because I was going to cuss, but I'm not gonna. Right? Who's really responsible for the bad situation? When really what it's going to be required is for each group to be vulnerable enough to begin to look at their responsibility in the conversation and
Yeah.
take ownership of some responsibility and then look at it in a real way. Because when you and I play the finger pointing game, nothing gets solved because all defenses go up. And it's like,
You
we're going to
know.
be required to be vulnerable. We're going to be required to look deeply and look truly. So I see Oz has joined us. I see Taylor. Hey, Taylor, it's been a minute. Good to see you. What are you guys taking away from the conversation? What's going on as you're listening? You were going to say something, Tria. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was gonna say, all week I've been writing and journaling about um, unlearning things, so we could allow new things to come into this space, right? And oh my gosh, from a Caribbean, and I know you could probably identify with this, from a Caribbean culture and a Caribbean background, like, nah, we're not out here, crying. Now, what's really funny is that you said that you used to be the family crier, right? Like, I'm still the family crier, but it's funny though, right? The cry shows up in funny places. Like, I'll be watching a comedy and then the waterworks will just go, right? Like, what is that all about? But that's what it is, when I've looked at how I've been raised, and oh,
Mm,
okay, so you have a problem, there's an issue here, suck it up, right? Like, literally suck it up, deal with it, move on. Okay. And so it's not giving myself the opportunity to even unpack all of the emotions and all the stuff that go through with it, or the thing is, figure it out on your own, right?
mm,
And like, literally, that's me. Like, okay, there's an issue, I'm gonna figure it out. But until I figure it out, it is going back into that perfection thing, right? Like, you're not going to see me sweat. When I figure it out, then, I'll emerge again. So it's just all of those things,
Mhm.
on learning, all of these
Absolutely.
patterns, on learning all of these behaviors, and then allowing, the space. And I like how you talk about creating the clearing, having the space for new things to come in.
And and what you're saying is so key because as parents,
Mm,
as leaders, as entrepreneurs who are creating cultures for businesses, we are charged with, if we want healthy cultures where people actually risk, innovate, and create healthy cultures, we are charged with creating a space where people are able to be vulnerable.
mhm.
Because in a world that's changing like this, in a world where cultures are coming together in a way that's not been seen before, in a way where we're dealing with change and situations, all these things. If people can't create the space, if we can't create the space for people to come to a place and be able to say, I'm confused, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, I'm afraid to fail, we're going to create an environment where where people think that perfect is the only way to survive in that space.
Yeah,
Perfect is an impossibility. And so what you're going to do is you're going to create an environment where guilt, shame, judgment
yes,
is thriving. It's got a
yes,
thriving feeding ground. So part of the reasons I do these conversations, and part of the reasons I do these conversations in my mastermind, and I create these spaces where vulnerability is the name of the game. And I don't mean vulnerability from a place of weakness. I mean vulnerability from a place of having the courage to speak your truth, both
yeah,
intellectually and emotionally, and knowing that the space is safe enough that we can handle and deal.
yeah,
And that is where healthy, thriving environments happen. And I facilitate processes where it's a diverse group. And people are always saying, I don't know how we end up having these deep conversations where people are talking and crying and sharing and whatever. We're creating the culture
yeah,
where it's okay to be vulnerable. But I'll tell you, growth happens like this,
yeah, yeah.
right? That's
Um,
what we're required to do. That's what we're charged with as leaders.
it's interesting that you say that, and it's one of the things that I think a lot of people, I probably have questions I probably struggle with too. It's just knowing when. Or the environments, like you said, creating a culture, to be vulnerable, right? But I think that that's the thing, like being able to recognize when a space is safe for vulnerability to occur. And I talk about that, and I have to say it because I'm in the social media world, and
Mhm.
it's one of those things that blocks a lot of people from showing up on social media, is the need to be perfect, the comparison, the blame, the shame, all of that stuff, shows up, right? So how do you identify, when a space is vulnerable? How do you know how much to share, who to share with? I think those are really the questions that people really do have.
That's a great question, and I think I'm big on earn the right,
Mm,
and so as a leader of a space, I'm required to set the example. I'm required to be the example. I'm required to
mm,
set the tone. I can't ask and expect anything of anyone that I'm not willing to do
yeah,
myself. I can't, if I've got to be able to admit when I fail. I've got to be able to talk freely about failure.
yeah,
I've got to talk about when things are hard. I've got to talk about when things are scary. I've got to talk about all these things because if I show up as my perfect self, and I talk about this when you're speaking, when you're training, if I show up as my perfect self, I'm gonna set the tone that everybody's got to be perfect. If
hmm,
I show up as my authentic, vulnerable self, then I'm going to earn the right
Yeah.
for people to risk with me. And so it is really, a leadership conversation in that, are we willing
Yeah.
to put the armor down? Are we willing to risk being vulnerable
Yeah.
first and creating that space? And anyone who hangs out in my environment, one is I'm very clear on who I hang with, so who my tribe is. And my tribe are people that I feel are willing to go there, but more importantly, they're willing to care for the people who are going there with me,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm very, I'm gonna earn your right, but you got to earn that right back. And I don't mean it from a place you got to prove it. But I watch people and how they show up in the world, and it's that piece around, I'm choosing to collaborate with
Yeah.
people who that is who they be, or that is who they're committed to being.
Yeah. I love that.
Great conversation. So let's
Love
see what
it.
we got. Oz is saying, just to experience this, the shame, I think it's a game played on me by my prodigal uncle, right? And yeah, Oz, it's everywhere. But and I think this is the thing I'll say is that, for me, when I see those things happening, I remind myself that I know
Mhm.
better, so I must do better. And although I got the quick-witted tongue, it's like, Suzanne, just bite it. Because we've got to set the examples. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing. I see Taylor saying, this is truth. This is truth. Tria, last words for everyone listening. What has been your biggest takeaway as you've done this work, or begun to do this
Oh,
around and we're really talking about negative emotions, because that's the stuff we don't talk about.
yeah. Yeah. So I think my biggest learn and my biggest takeaway is to be able to name the emotion. Because one of the things that I realized that there's a whole bunch of emotion,
Not just
and
anger.
yeah, and everything is just grouped under this nice little word that's called anger. So the term emotional literacy is new for me. I've heard of emotional intelligence, but
Mm,
emotional literacy is having the ability to actually put the words, to what it is that you are feeling. And then
mm-hmm.
that's the beginning step. So once I'm able to really accept, like, this is what it is I'm feeling, and then be present to the story that's running in my mind, and then it's like, yeah, okay, seriously, how did you get there in your mind? Literally, you just made the whole thing up, right? Then it's not so bad. But I think that that's what it is like, we hold all of these things in, right? And it just runs and it runs. And then on the on the outside, others are so heavily, impacted by it, and this is the magnitude of it. So I'm just speaking from a myself perspective, but just imagine when you have numbers of people who are
Mm,
experiencing, the same feelings, and they don't know how to unpack it. Just imagine the impact that it's having on communities, on families, on the world. Like, when you look at it from that perspective, it is huge.
yeah, and I think when you look at it from that perspective, I think leadership, in my mind, is
Mm,
taking responsibility for doing our own work and being that little bit of change that people see out there.
yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. You have been listening to Unstoppable Mindset. I have been sitting down and in conversation with social media strategist Taria Hodge. If you want to continue this conversation, feel free to reach out to me. We will put the link in the comment section for anyone who wants to have a 20-minute mindset moment with me. We'll definitely put that in there. If you want to find out a little bit more about mindset mastery, you can go into this event and you'll see the link and our mindset mastery mini course, and it just gives you a little bit of depth. And one of them is emotional mastery. Like master your emotions, and it's right in there, and there's a video and some questions you can answer to begin to look at that. So definitely join us if you are looking for a group of people who are super achievers. Please knock on the door of our Facebook group, Unstoppable Mindset for Super Achievers. We are all hanging out there, having great conversations. We will be back here next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Definitely join the conversation. Join us. Remember, if you are listening on YouTube, remember to subscribe and like. If you're listening on any other platform, leave us a comment. Let us know what you took away from this conversation. And remember to share it with a friend. Get in conversation with a friend. Why do we ask you to do so? Because I know that when I talk about what I've learned and I implement one thing, I internalize it. And that's why we do these. So everyone, have a blessed week. And as we part, please remember, know you're special, know you are so brilliant, and the world is waiting for your unique gifts. Take care, blessings. We'll see you next week.